Welcome to the Connection Central Industry Podcast, where real conversations meet real strategies. Each episode we dive into the industries that keep Australia moving, talking with the leaders, innovators, and everyday operators, shaping what's next. So settle in, turn it up, and let's get into it.
Hello, everybody. It's Michelle O'Hara here from Connection Central with another business industry podcast for you. Today, we are very lucky to have Rebecca and Phoebe from HR Dynamics. Welcome, ladies.
Hello.
Michelle, thank you so much for having us on today.
So good to have you both. So this is the first time we've done a double act duo. So let's begin, ladies, by sharing with the audience how the two of you actually got together and created HR Dynamics. Tell us a bit about the history.
It was so long ago. Can we remember, Phoebe?
Exactly. And I'll tell you a funny story to start is that I can't even remember where we were introducing each other. And someone was like, how do you know each other? And Rebecca immediately said, we're friends. And I immediately said, we're business partners. Beck's like, are we not friends first? And I'm like, business partner is a higher status.
So it will forever go down in history that we're just business partners.
We're business partners. So we started, look, our relationship started before HR Dynamics. We worked together at the Sheraton Port Douglas many years ago when I was the HR officer there, and Rebecca had just finished her degree, and you came in as sort of a graduate coming into the workplace. So we worked together for a couple of years there. Then Beck went on and explored some other opportunities with some other organisations, and then we set up HR Dynamics 18 years ago. So yeah, it's making me feel very old to say those numbers.
No, let's think of it as experience.
It's been a hard 18 years, but we've really evolved, I think, over that time as well. I think when we started out, we weren't even really sure what our service offering was, and HR wasn't as well known what it is now. And I think that's been a really sorry, it's just an echo. Sorry. And there's been a real shift in the market as well. There's lots of HR providers and, a lot of changes that we've seen over that time.
Yeah, I think when we first started, we thought we were going to do a lot of leadership development, and Rebecca had quite extensive experience in recruitment, and people were like, yeah, mate, I just want you to help me fire Billy because he's giving me the shits. And we were like, okay, we can do that. And then we did get a couple of lucky falls, the sudden and massive change in the industrial relations landscape in Australia, which happened in 2010, where we went from state and federal awards to a federal system only, and the introduction of modern awards. So that certainly assisted us in getting more people started to sit up and pay a little bit more attention to human resources and what it means and how it really is an important partner with the business. And I think we've just really evolved since then.
Nice. Good segue, ladies, because I guess, talking to all the other businesses on these podcasts, obviously the number one challenge everybody is having right now and will be having going forward is the lack of resources, productivity, and motivation of staff. So just share with us a bit about how the HR world, you already touched upon it, Rebecca, has changed in, I guess, the focus. So more towards, like you said, Phoebe, the leadership, and that sort of thing. What are you seeing in those spaces? And what sort of suggestions as well, I guess, would you give to business owners to what should they be doing right now to get ready?
Yeah, look, I think there's a couple of answers to that. One of the things that I think that has been very much of relevance recently is a lot of legislation around what is appropriate workplace behaviour and what isn't. And I think that and I clearly remember when I worked as a waitress, when I was studying, and, I'd get yelled at by the chefs, and I remember there was an exec chef that used to stand on the pass and turn the vegetables. It was a fine dining restaurant, and he used to throw them at us if he wasn't happy or he wanted to get our attention. I remember having a customer rub the inside of my thigh when I was taking orders and telling my maitre d', and they were like, well, mate, that's why we get good tips. You just need to suck it up. I remember going to a job interview and being told, are you sure this is what you really want, what you are wanting? It's very demanding. And won't you be wanting to have babies at some stage down the track? So there's a lot of this sort of stuff was just commonplace. And now we're saying, yeah, no, you can't do that.
Okay.
That's not okay. So I think it's interesting people say, there's so much of this happening in the workplace now. I actually think it has always been around, but now we're saying, bullying behaviour, appropriate equity within the workplace, people standing up. And don't get me wrong, there are situations where we've got people that, is that echoing for you?
Yes,
you're right.
it is.
There are situations where we've got people that I'm like, yeah, that's a bit of a dodgy claim, or there's a performance management and you're making these claims. Of course, we get some of those coming up. But I actually think that there's been a lot of changes in relation to what is professional, what isn't professional, and expectations. So I think that's a good thing. And I'm really pleased that my daughters don't have to go through some of the things in the workplace and be subjected the same way. And sometimes when I'm doing training with groups of particularly older generation people, and I say, how would you like your daughters or your grandkids to be treated in the workplace? What would be your expectation? And it makes them shut up and think about it, and what is appropriate, and showing of photos or sharing experiences from the weekend. So that's been a massive change. I think that's really big one. I think the productivity one is a really interesting and hot topic at the moment, because there's just so many factors that are leading into this at the moment. We have had a extended period time of low unemployment in Australia. So that has meant that we've really just been, we just need numbers. We just need a head count to be able to do the job. There hasn't been the competitive need to be a high performer and productive necessarily, because you're needed more than that you're not easily replaced necessarily. However, the introduction of AI is bringing some interesting stuff that's happening. And a lot of those tasks, and we're seeing it more and more, like even every week, where people are saying, hey, I think we need to do a restructure. We need to look at the job description, because some of the tasks that this other person was doing, it's been automated, or we've used AI, or there's, systems that are in place. And so there's been a massive change in what are the actual roles that we require people for in the workplace, and what does productivity look like. So I think this is this is the start of some massive organisational structure changes that we're starting to see.
And I agree. And I think even some of the some people, as people are resigning or leaving roles, they're not replacing them as well, because they realise that some of that can be done with AI, and that, to stand out in the marketplace as well, then there has to be that training, and, you're reliant so much more on your staff now, because customer service is what makes you stand out, because AI can do those background tasks. People still want that person-to-person contact, so they'll come to you for the customer service side of it. So I think it's really changing. I think it's really changing workplaces.
It's not just AI as in, you're thinking accounts and EA, or, administrational tasks. We've got a client that has ordered robot bots from China, and they'll be doing, the clearing or the bussing of the plates from the restaurant through to the kitchen, so that they've got, some savings around that. And they've also got, potentially there's going to be some automation from behind the bar with pouring drinks and measuring it out, so they can cut back on staffing costs by putting in some of these other systems. Now, the one they haven't replaced a cleaner, because they've got some of those robots that are doing all the cleaning, because they've become far more advanced with it. So yeah, some really big changes that we're starting to see happen.
I noticed when we stayed on the Gold Coast, the hotel had the robots in the corridors. They weren't public areas cleaners. The vacuuming and everything was done by these robots, because my kids were very interested in it, of course. And then it would do the hallway. So I don't know, I don't know how it all worked out, or whether they went in the lifts or what they did. But yes, you would see every morning the robots vacuuming the halls.
I rang to make an appointment the other day, and it was answered by an AI. I am an automated assistant. Please tell me what your query is, and I'll see if I can organise it for you. They were super good. But I spoke to them exactly as I would a normal person, what I needed, when I needed the appointment, what I needed it for. And it was like having a conversation with a person, and they booked it in. No human contact required whatsoever.
Which is more and more. We use Salesforce, and a lot of that we don't have that level of Salesforce because we're only a small business. But when we go to those Salesforce events, that is exactly what they're bringing in, is that all of that AI automation, and you ring and you talk to someone, and it all links back to their CRM, and they can, go as far to send and package things out. You can ring up and make an order, and it can all be done by AI. So it's a really changing, and we're not saying this to scare people, because there will always be jobs that humans need to do. Humans are going to be important, but, it really is a real changing workforce at the moment.
I think, though, what we're going to do is we're going to be really selective as to what our headcount is, what the positions and what the skill set is. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I think that we might see a bit of a lift in some of the standard and the productivity, which will be good. Unfortunately, I do think we're going to go through a period where we're going to... So the other factor that we're seeing at the moment is obviously the unstable economy that we've got, mortgage rate rise, just a feeling of fear as to what's happening overseas, and, fuel prices and traveling overseas. And it's making people feel, quite nervous. There's a level of anxiety, I believe, that is out in the community, and then that sort of starts to manifest itself in interesting ways. So people come to work and they're not as patient with their colleague as they might be, or when the manager's wanting to have a meeting discussing everyone's productivity and what they've got on, reading too much into that, oh my gosh, there's going to be some redundancies that are going to be happening as a result of it. And so we get defensive, and I personally think we're going into some really choppy water time from a workplace. I hate to say that, but I think this is, we're going through a rough crossing.
Our general manager has a word for that behaviour. What does she call it, Phoebe?
I know the word you're talking about, but I can't remember what it is. Yeah.
It's there's an actual word for it, because people are getting very defensive and worried, and I can't remember. I'll need to look it up. We'll come back to you on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds so many good things here. There's 3 things, ladies, I've picked out, which I love, and so it would be so helpful for those listening. So first of all, Rebecca, you mentioned the need for customer service, and that's what and especially if I put my strategic marketing hat on, that's definitely a point of difference, because a lot of that is existing. But do you feel, and I guess from yours point of view, we've gone through this period of social media and everything online, that do the people coming through now have the skills to give the customer service? So what does that look like from an HR point of view? Do they just sack everybody but then there's not enough people with the right attitude to come in and care? And what does that look like from a customer service point of view?
I think it comes from the top as well. I mean, if you go leading your workplace in a very negative frame and you're not customer service focused, I don't feel that your employees will be. And, it's about that level of engagement. So for an example, there's a cafe we all go to. I live on the Sunshine Coast, and we all go to this particular cafe. And we were at a lunch on Friday, and we were talking, and we all go there. But we all said none of us particularly like the food. The coffee's pretty good. None of us particularly like the food or the setting, but we all go there because we love the guy that runs it.
Yes.
He remembers you, and he is just always so happy that you're there, and you get this amazing, you go there and you're like, oh, I feel really good about myself. And I think that is what people are looking for. And because he's always like that, all his staff, and you know what, sometimes they get things wrong, and you're like, it doesn't really matter, because they're so lovely and friendly and genuine. And that comes from the leadership of this particular cafe. So we all go there for him and the staff, not actually for the product.
Yeah, I think it's about, there needs to be clarity at a senior level as to what does good service look like in your organisation, what are your expectations from it, and what is the productivity level, what is expected with that. So being able to articulate that really clearly is important, and hire to that and train to that. But also then to keep it front and centre through their employment journey with you. So that may be setting of KPIs, it may be having some sort of visual board with how everyone's performing and where they're at, because people are clever. And if they know they're being tracked and it's being looked at, we want to be top of the leaderboard. We want to be part of success of the company. We want to be seeing that we're being successful. So we just need to be told what that looks like and told how we're tracking, and we're far more likely to get there. And it's those businesses that it might be in their mind, but they're not articulating, they're not communicating it, they're not giving people feedback as to how they're going. I think they're the ones that will
good and bad feedback too. If you see something that's, pull it up when it's happening. Well, maybe not in front of customers, but, pull it up, when it happens, so the person is aware, because so often we meet with businesses and we say, have you addressed this with them? Have you let the staff member know their concerns? And they say, they've got pages and pages of things they've done wrong, but the poor staff member's got no idea that they've done any of this because it's never been brought up with them. So how can they improve if they're not told?
It's something we're really not good at, is being able to give feedback to staff. We don't like having those hard conversations and those tough conversations. It's much easier for me to go and have a bitch about it to Rebecca about how I'm frustrated about something, rather than just putting on my big girl shoes and actually sitting down and having a constructive conversation. And it's also quite difficult to be able to have those conversations without the person getting defensive as well. So you need it to land the right way. So, sometimes I see people having a conversation, hard conversation. They've got themselves so worked up and they've thought about it and they've overthought it and it just goes, And I'm like, the way that it's received, the person is either going to be disengaged or leaving. It's actually not going to be building their confidence and their desire to improve. So you really sometimes you need to develop those skills, or you need to get some help around that as to how to do that delivery. I think that's really, that's a really important piece. Sorry, Michelle, this is your podcast and you don't even get a chance to talk.
We're just completely taking it over.
It's about you, ladies. It's okay. So in that regard, do you guys actually, no, that's good. Do you guys actually, I guess, facilitate those conversations, but also go in and teach or show the leaders how to have those conversations? Because it obviously is something that is happening more and more. And you're right, people aren't necessarily very good at it.
Yeah, look, it's a layered approach. We've got some clients where they have lost their, like the writing license, they've lost their license to be able to have those conversations with staff because they can't be trusted, that we won't end up in a Fair Work as a result. So I'm like, tell me what you want to say and I'll be the delivery of it because you're too emotive on this.
No amount of kicking under the table works anymore. So they've just been banned.
So, that is the extreme. But then we also have that proactive where we're training managers and business owners so that they can kind of see the signs and get onto it early. Because if you have the conversation early on, it can be an easy conversation to have because it hasn't kind of escalated or snowballed. And then the next layer is, okay, well, I've got this situation, and they may just want to talk through what their strategy is going to be, what some key words or some statements are going to be, what follow-up correspondence. So we can really just be in the background giving that background coaching and support so that the delivery can go well. Or, as I said in the first instance, we can just go in there and hold the conversation. And sometimes we'll work with businesses where we'll hold those conversations initially. That might be doing also performance reviews, giving feedback, just so that they can hear how they can be run and get some good structure in place for it so that they build their confidence and their skill set to be able to do them moving forward.
Wonderful. It sounds your clients are very lucky to have you in their corner by the sounds. So we were talking beforehand a little bit about motivation and the generations. It's 5 generations, I believe, we have in the workplace. Is that right? At the moment, my goodness, and again, let's give your advice here to the business owners from your HR perspective. Hey, because there is so much, like you mentioned, Phoebe, there's so much sort of overwhelm. There's so much pressure from a business owner point of view. And now we have to think about so much more. Like we have to care about the staff and what's going on in their lives and motivate. Oh, for God's sakes, like it was so much easier back in the day when we can just come to work and get your work done, right? I'm not allowed to say that. But what is some advice, I guess, from that motivational point of view to help the business owners? What sort of things do you guys do to help them with that so that they get the most, not get the most, but the best productivity and the best person showing up for the job every day?
Yeah. I think that a common mistake that sometimes happens is that as a business owner, what will motivate me to work harder and to get good results is probably quite different to what's going to motivate my team. So if I really push and talk about the benefits, our P&L is going to be better and we're going to have better results for the company. That may be very motivating for me as a business owner, but it's not necessarily going to be motivating for the staff. And it will vary also with the staff as well. We're seeing a really interesting trend which just fascinates me because of the whole cost of living, yet I would have thought people want to work more and earn more money, but we're seeing that people, even at younger generation, where lifestyle is really important to them. So they want to be able to work flexible hours or shorter days, or have, longer days and have more days off with it. So that's and that can be a hugely motivating factor for some people, that flexibility to do that. For some people, it might just be praise. It might be making them, really promoting how well the company is doing, and there's a sense of pride. So you really have to read your workforce, read the team. And is it a young workforce that, actually the whole social aspect of it's important. And so, we need to make sure that once a month that we have a lunch together and everyone has a chat, or there's time to talk about a TV show that we've had. And I know that sounds silly. It's like, really, that's not work. Well, you know what? If it's making people want to come to work and feel good and be engaged, then it does actually work to your advantage to do that. So you have to kind of unlock what are those things that are going to pull the right strings to get my team working at the highest level of productivity and performance. It's not a one size fits all.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it doesn't even matter on the generation. Every person is quite different. Every person's circumstances quite different. What they're looking for is quite different. So, it's about what motivates them. I know one of our particular consultants who's in Phoebe and my generation, it's really important to her to have flexibility, and that goes both ways for her to us. And that is what is her main driver. More than anything else, flexibility is what she needs at this stage of her life. Whereas I know for another one of our staff members, who's actually one of our younger staff members, we need to tell her to stop working because she would work all hours of the day and night if we let her. And that it just really, and one of her drivers is more, some bonuses and those sort of things. It really depends on the person.
So what sort of, I guess, again, from a business owner's point of view, are you able to come in and like run or do you have conversations with the staff, or how do you guys support? I think more and more our business owners and leaders, they need the answers, right? They've got so much going on. So the more that I feel like everyone can outsource to the experts, the better, right? So what sort of things would you guys do in that case? Would you come in and have the conversations, facilitate? How would you do that? Or what would you suggest?
Yeah, look, again, it's really going to depend upon the organisation's size and what their needs are going to be for it. It can be good to be doing staff surveys to get feedback. We may talk to some of the staff. It may just be a case of actually carving some time out with the owner or the management team, and we do a bit of a SWOT analysis, what's working well. Because I think sometimes we focus on a lot of everything that's not working well, and we forget to celebrate and take advantage of the things that are working well. If they're talking about, it's so hard to find staff, and we'll go through it and we might find that 80% of their staff is actually great. It's just 20% that we've got some struggles with. So let's have a look at that and how we're going to deal with that. So I think that Beck and I work in a very unstructured way, and we have all different ways of working with clients depending. It's really about depending upon, what your business needs are, but having a plan in place is what we need to get to. We need a plan, and there needs to be clarity in your head as to what does a high performing team and a high performing business looks like to me, and then what are the steps that I need to take to be able to get that. Do I need to look at, the recruitment process, the coaching, the training, the setting the KPIs, the holding the accountability, the doing the performance reviews, the building the teamwork, improving the customer service. What are some of those things that we need to, that is the highest priority for us to be able to work on? And it will change. It's not a set and forget. We really work on an area with it, hopefully get some uplift and some improvement. And then, it might be time to work on another part of the business to kind of build that workplace culture and that performance.
That's gold.
And what
Phoebe,
are your
I think
business? Sorry,
Yes,
you go, Michelle.
No,
I was
I
going
was
to
just
say,
saying
you
that's
really need to think
gold.
about what your business goals are.
You talk.
I was just going to add to that and say you need to think about what your business goals are too, because it's not always growth. Your business goals, you don't, that might be, are your staff aware of that and what your goals are over the next 5 years and what your plan is as well. And I think that needs to be clear in your mind, because, growth shouldn't be the only goal. And sometimes it's not even, you might be at the right side. size, you just need to get your systems right, and you need to get your processes. So for instance, Phoebe and I, we're at a really good size at the moment, and growth isn't really our strategy, but we're really working behind the scenes to try and get some of our systems and processes. And, we've got a great team. We've got that in place, but we need to be a little bit more systemized, because as Phoebe and I said, we are a little bit up all over the shop,
Chaotic.
a little bit chaotic. So,
That's me, Mark. We are.
and that's our goal. So our goal isn't to grow bigger. It's just to get really good at what we are really good at what we do. Our staff are, but get our business running really smoothly.
And I think for business owners too, what is your ultimate goal? Like, are you wanting to set this up so that you're really entrenched and working in it on a day-to-day basis? And because it's actually doing the job is what you enjoy, and that's why you do it. So it's kind of some of those other support services that you're putting in place. Or are you actually wanting to set up an organisational structure that you don't have to be hands-on on working in the business, so that you can, move away, work on other things, take holidays, or the business is, more sellable when you're not entrenched with it. So I think you have to it's really good to, and maybe talk to a good business coach or someone to really go through that and really get some tangible goals in place as to, this is where I'm heading or what I need to get to. Then we can come in and help you with the staffing strategy in order to achieve that.
Beautiful. And ladies, you're not alone when you say you're all over the place. Every successful business owner right now, I believe, is working out the best way to do things more efficiently and adapting. And I think, that execution piece that you are working on is what will keep you in the game and ahead of the game in the future. So don't feel like you're all over the place. Everybody who's successful is doing the same. Look, we're almost at the end, but I did want to just talk about compliance versus people, because obviously with all the new laws and so much going on again in business, how do employers navigate the compliance versus the people? What's more important? What do they need to think about? What suggestions do you have on that?
Look, you've just got to do the compliance. I'll give you an example. Yesterday, I was talking to someone, small business, only a couple of couple of staff. He had come and spoken to us about employment contracts, didn't want to invest in it. He thought it was an over-capitalisation in that area, which is fine. He's now come to me, and his staff member has said that they are claiming overtime because they haven't had breaks. And he wasn't aware of that. And, there was no contract in place which made it clear that it's your responsibility to have the breaks. There was no timesheets that was showing that they should have had their breaks. So he's like, but, she worked autonomously. She should have been able to. Why wasn't she able to do it? And it's like, well, where have you made that clear? And so, the other thing that's changed, that whereas we used to be able to have a sexual harassment, funnily enough, sexual harassment's never been legal in the workplace, but we just had to have a policy and we had to react appropriately if a complaint came through. So there's been a massive change in the legislation around this, where you can't just have a policy and react. You have a positive duty of care where you have to train your staff as to what sexual harassment is, what their rights are, how they report it, how they stop it. So if you don't do that, you're not meeting your duty of care. Therefore, not only can you get action and fair work, they're talking about doing personal fines coming through if they're not seeing owners and managers meeting their duty of care and meeting those legislational requirements. So I could just stand on a soapbox and go on and on. I'm not into big, bulky, dust collecting documents. I think that just gives me the heebie-jeebies. But is definitely around HR, your employment contract, your award, your classification, clarity around your remuneration, the need to have fitness for work, for disclosing if you don't have fitness for work, being really clear as to what you do to support psychosocial safety, so mental health in the workplace, how you're meeting your positive duty requirements as to what you're doing around that, what you're doing to make it a safe workplace. So all of these things, your time sheets, there's just those things. And people are like, oh, I'm only a small business, I don't have time, or I can't do it. Well, if you can't do that, you can't have a business. That's like saying, oh, well, I have a business, but I'm not going to pay tax because, I can't really afford to pay tax. It's like, you know what? It ain't negotiable. And you might get away with it for a certain period of time, but at some stage, you're going to get caught out with your pants down, and it's going to hurt.
Gold. That's amazing. No, I love it. I think you've absolutely nailed it there, Phoebe, in the fact that it is a not negotiable. So, you either do it or yes. So, ladies, we've
Yeah,
come to the end, but what I'd love for you to do is just give us one pointer, both of you, I guess, what business owners should do right now to help them in this whole area of HR.
I think that they need to have clarity around what the minimum obligations are for them as an employer around fair work compliance and workplace health and safety. And if they can't just go blah and say and be really confident and know what that is, whether you employ one person or whether you employ 100 people, you need to upskill in that space, and you need to understand where there's some gaps and what you can do, because not knowing is not acceptable. Like, oh, I didn't know, my bad. That just doesn't wash it anymore. You need to know and you need to understand. So, and there's so many ways you can get it, there's no excuse. That would be mine.
Excellent. Rebecca?
And I would back that up. I would say if you jump onto our website, we have a free HR audit, no obligation, nothing like that. But it's a really good audit, and you could easily, get some really good tick boxes. It's just at the top of our website, and download that and make sure you're doing those things and that you're aware, because like Phoebe said, there isn't really any excuse. And if you have a business, you just have to do these things.
Can I just say one more thing? Sorry, Michelle. As I said before, we are going into choppy work waters. I think it is going to be a tough time in a lot of workplaces. Just remember that the energy and the attitude that you have is going to wear off on the staff around you. So if you are going in crisis mode and really stressed and snapping at staff, and that is just going to filter through right through to your customer service. So in these times, you really need to hold yourself to account as to, what is the work environment I want, and how am I portraying that positive, that focus, that solid, that stable. Because if you start to get wobbly, things, the business are going to tumble at this time. And, you are going to be instrumental in being able to steady the ship through this process.
Fabulous. Ladies, this has been absolutely amazing. I know that the people watching will get so many takeaways. So thank you both so very much for jumping on. And all your details will be, anyone who wants to contact you will also be in the post when we send that out, etc. But thanks for coming on today.
Thanks heaps,
Lovely
Michelle.
to talk to you.
Thank you for
Thanks so
having us.
much, Michelle. Take care. Bye-bye.
Ciao for now.